got first speaker here is John Thomas. He's Vietnam vet. He's superintendent of Pike County Schools.
Thank you, Buster. I too would like to thank all the participants in the parade. I'd like to thank the band for their time in coming out this evening. And this is quite an honor to have been asked to participate in the Winslow Memorial Day Parade. I have a few comments that I'd like to make. And I can't say enough, nor can we do enough, to commend and honor the men and women who died in our military services. I have a little poem I'd like to start with. We cherish too the poppy red that grows on fields where valor led. It seems to signal to the skies that blood of heroes never dies. A Mrs. Michaels of France conceived of an ideal to wear red poppies on Memorial Day in honor of those who died serving the nation during the war. She was the first one to wear one and sold poppies to her friends and co-workers with the money going to benefit servicemen in need. This tradition spread to other countries, and in 1922, shortly before Memorial Day, the VFW became the first veterans organization to nationally sell poppies. 2 years later, the Buddy Poppy program was organized nationally to honor our American veterans who gave their lives for freedoms that we hold today. Memorial Day is a sacred day of remembrance to honor those who paid the ultimate price for our freedoms. We need to remember with sincere respect those who paid the price for our freedoms. We need to keep in sacred remembrance those who died serving their country. We need to never let them be forgotten. This Memorial Day, we stop, we pause, we take time here in Winslow, Indiana, Pike County, to pay with sincere conviction our respects for those who died protecting and preserving the freedoms we enjoy. For we owe those honored dead more than we can ever repay. Duty, honor, and country. Those three hallowed words best describe what the American veteran has stood for and will continue to stand for all Americans to follow. Our American fighting men and women have held and do hold the nation's destiny and our future freedom in their hands. Those three words are America's rallying points. They give America a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a vigor of the emotion, a freshness of the deep springs of life, a sentimental predominance of courage over timidity, an appetite for adventure of love over ease. In this way, the veteran has taught us all an appreciation for America's fighting men and women. These comments were made by General Douglas MacArthur in an address to a graduating class at West Point at his time of retirement from the U.S. Army. As I said earlier, Memorial Day is a day set aside as a celebration to honor America's fighting men and women for their patriotism, for their love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. Freedom does not come cheaply. The first American colonists to this new land learned that lesson in the hardships in which they faced. That lesson was reinforced on the battlefield of Yorktown and Shiloh. It was taught again at places like Gettysburg and Saratoga. It was refined on the Maginot Line and sharply drilled in places like Monte Cassino and on Omaha Beach, in a place called Normandy on Pork Chop Hill, and in Hue, Da Nang in South Vietnam. As President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, June the 6th, 1944 will live in infamy. This was the greatest land invasion, amphibious invasion, ever mustered on the face of the earth. In that battle, we lost hundreds before they even got to the beach, before they got off their amphibious craft. Total, we lost over 10,000 men in a matter of 4 weeks. because it took us 4 weeks to get to Berlin after that. In World War II, there were over 25 million people who died as a direct or indirect result of the war. And when the Germans were finally reached by the American fighting men, one in particular, General George C. Patton, they were horrified at what they saw. They saw bodies at Dachau, piled. Auschwitz was even worse. Bodies half burned in ovens. These were the Jews of Germany. This atrocity was committed by the Third Reich and by the Nazis under President Hitler. He called himself president. He was actually a dictator. As I said, freedom does not come cheaply. In looking back at American heroes, it's hard to imagine the level of expectation that greeted Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he ascended to take the reign from the much maligned Hoover. The 50-year-old man who was considered an aristocrat, distant cousin of the 26th president, had barely finished 4 years as governor of New York. His legs were so wasted by polio, he had to strap an awkward brace, merely to stand unaided. Yet the task ahead of him was, with the exception of Washington's and Lincoln's, the greatest challenge ever presented to an American leader. It was said, "Yours is the first opportunity to carve a name in the halls of immortals besides Jesus," offered one. Another stated, "People are looking to you almost as they look to God." General Douglas MacArthur, an American hero, commanded the American and Allied forces in the Pacific and the American forces in Korea. General MacArthur saw something unprincipled in a war of limited aims. He had fought valiantly in World War I, and in Korea he had entered at a moment when that nation seemed lost, and against all odds reversed the tide, bringing the communists back above the 38th parallel. General MacArthur had been fired because he wanted to take China. But his return was paradoxically like one long confetti-filled victory lap, and the egotistical general loved every shred of it. He started in Japan, where over 400,000 turned out to cheer him, then flew to Hawaii, where another 100,000 met him on the tarmac. From there, he went to San Francisco, where over 500,000 welcomed him en route to give a speech at City Hall, finally landing in Washington, where a defiant Congress invited him to address the nation. The enthusiasm was overwhelming. One congressman said he heard the voice of God in MacArthur's thundering tones. Former President Herbert Hoover discovered in him the reincarnation of St. Paul. A ticker-tape parade followed in New York City, ever larger and louder than the one that had greeted Lindbergh in 1927. There's a real hero. Then there was General George C. Patton. Probably, in my opinion, one of the best examples of what I consider an American hero. In December of 1944, when the German offensive in Western Europe drove a bulge into the lines of the First Army, Patton, within 48 hours, turned his entire Third Army 90 degrees to the left and started the drive that ultimately linked with the embattled defenders of the German bulge. The German attack was contained. During the course of World War II, Patton and his warriors had given a magnificent performance. Third Army had gone farther, faster, and conquered more territory, killed, wounded, and captured more enemy soldiers than any other army in the record of the history of war. There's a hero. Now, the efficiency of these generals made it possible for you and I to have the freedoms that we have today. Who knows how many lives were saved as a result of their efficiency as generals and their knowledge and their ability and capability. That's why I bring them up. Because as I said, in World War II, we lost 25 million people worldwide. The South Pacific Theater and the European Theater. And so were those who, in the face of derision and ridicule from some of their peers, believed enough in the concepts of liberty to trudge through the rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. They did not cowardly flee to Canada, those who were in Vietnam. I, for one, didn't. They were there for America, and so were their families. All were and are heroes to me. The Vietnam veteran who lost his life and gave his life in Vietnam, I have great admiration for. In many ways, I was lucky. I was in the Air Cavalry, out in the field too, as an infantryman. There were times that I was sent out. We had a chopper shot down in the Song Bay Valley. The men on the chopper were jumping off the chopper. It bothers me to talk about this. I'm going to anyway because I feel compelled to. As the chopper came down, the men had already jumped off. They chopped their heads off. Well, my squad was brought in. We were given the responsibility to match the heads to the bodies, put them in plastic bags so they could be taken back to Japan. Worst experience I've ever experienced. But I think about those young men who lay there on the ground and what they gave for their life. They gave their life for what they gave for our country. And you know, we have some Pike Countyans who prayed a great deal as well. At this time, I would like to honor all the Pike County Vietnam veterans by reading their names. If you're related to, would you please step forward? I'm not going to have you do a speech or anything like that. I just like to recognize you. So at this time, we'll begin. Bobby J. Walters. Stephen A. Bell. Herbert J. Lotus. Gary R. Morton. James W. Raggle. Douglas A. Lamont. Kenneth W. Fowler. Remain there, please. And in the last 10 years, we've been involved in another conflict. Started out with, I think, the Desert Storm. 10 years we've been involved in our Middle East and also in Iraq, Afghanistan, and even Iran at times. We've lost over 6,000 men and women in the last 10 years. And we here in Pike County lost one soldier so far, Darrell L. Smith. And then also in Vietnam, his name is on the memorial in Washington, but he grew up in Pike County. That's correct, right, Buster? John Dayton. So if you're a relative, would you please step forward? And at this time, I'd like to be honored, to honor these young men with the playing of taps. Our prayers this Memorial Day go out to those families. Words will not replace them. Some have children here in Pike County, grandchildren maybe by now, because they would be about my age. So I'd like to say that our hearts are with you. It was certainly a difficult conflict. I hate to look at a war and not to be able to say the United States won that war, but I admire the men and women who gave their lives and who fought for our freedoms. Thank you. God bless you.
I got another group here I'd like to have up here, and Pete will come up here and speak for the Indiana Patriot Guard. We're really proud to have him here this year.
Thank you, Buster. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me thank the City of Winslow for inviting us to this parade. I've been told to speak up and keep it short. I represent a group that rode motorcycles today, the Patriot Guard Riders. We are over 240,000 strong. Started a little over 6 years ago, a little less than 6 years ago, in response to a group out of Kansas that was protesting military funerals. The grassroots organization called itself the Patriot Guard Riders, and what they did at the invitation of the family for that soldier, and soldiers ever since, have stood between any disruption of the military funeral and anyone who protests. There's no membership, doesn't cost anything to join. Check our websites out. A few words about what this day means to me. All I can say is thank you for those since 1775 until today who have fallen or have not returned. Thank you. That's what this day represents, to honor those who wore the uniform of our country. Those many, many years. Our group is comprised of veterans and non-veterans. What we all are patriots. And I'd like to close my remarks with something that is also very important to me. It's become more important in my life since I learned it as a kid. If you'll face the colors of this country and say with me the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Hoorah!
Thank you guys for being here. And the band's going to play a song, and that concludes the service.